We've made a study about the inclusion of older cancer patients in clinical trials, and we try to assess the evolution of the inclusion of elderly patients in these trials before and after SIOG was founded. We analyzed all clinical trials, that is to say phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 randomized controlled trials that assessed therapies for hematological and solid tumors for the patients older than 60 years old. We also identified all phase 3 clinical trials in order to retrieve subgroup analysis dedicated to older cancer patients. And then we compared the evolution of these clinical trials between two time periods, a time period that was the pre-SIOG period, running from 2001 to 2004, and the post-SIOG period, which ran from 2011 to 2014. And what we saw in this comparison, it's that there was a tremendous increase in the absolute number of clinical trials, which came from 128 in the first period and 415 in the second period, and that this increase was mainly explained by subgroup analysis made in phase 3 randomized controlled trials. So we also found that the use of endpoints, because we analyzed the clinical trials generally, but also in details, and we found that the use of endpoints was relevant for overall survival and patient-reported outcome with an increase over time, but we also found that other elderly-specific endpoints, such as functional status, remain seldom used, and that is something that we think should be encouraged in the years to come. It's what I said in my conclusion, because we made some recommendation, and I think we should use as primary endpoints that evaluate at the same time quantity and quality of life. And in order to do so, this is what we discussed during the question session. There are three main ways to do so. We can either use composite endpoints or co-primary endpoints or quality-adjusted life year endpoints. And in my opinion, I would prefer to use co-primary endpoints because I think it evaluates independently the two endpoints. But some people like to evaluate composite endpoints, but I think that when we evaluate composite endpoints, it can be very tricky to interpret when there is a difference in the evolution of endpoint. That is to say, if we evaluate an aggressive therapy that improves survival, but on the other hand decreases quality of life, we can't conclude on the composite endpoint. So that's why I prefer to use co-primary endpoints, even though it can be more difficult for statisticians, but I think it's more meaningful. We made a logistic regression analysis to know what were the factors associated with an increase of subgroup analysis between the two time periods. And one of the factors explaining this increase was the journals in which the clinical trials were published. And journals with high impact factor, more than 20, tend to publish more subgroup analysis. So that is something we said during the question session, is that we should ask reviewers to ask for subgroup analysis for all the patients, for efficacy, but also for toxicity, because in the majority of cases, the subgroup analysis are only about efficacy and not about toxicity. Yeah, I think there is some impact, but we still have some work to do, and the problem with when we improve our work is that the conclusions, we only get them 10 years later, so we have to wait. But I think there's been some progress. And maybe something that we didn't evaluate in the evolution of clinical trials is that we didn't assess geriatric intervention trials, and I think it's another thing that we should recommend for the future, is to design more trials on geriatric interventions.